My name is Kira Raymond. They said I was the reason his business failed, that I brought sickness, debt, and disgrace. So I gave them exactly what they accused me of, and watched them fall apart without me. Before we begin, this is a true story. Names have been changed, but the prejudice, accusations, and sweet revenge are all real. If you're new here, hit subscribe, because this story of turning superstition into justice will leave you speechless. The whispers started the day I married into the prestigious Chen family. During the elaborate wedding ceremony, my mother-in-law burned extra incense, muttering prayers to ward off what she called foreign bad luck. My mixed heritage, half French, half Indian, apparently required spiritual intervention. I should have seen it then. The way they looked at me during the tea ceremony, the tight smiles, the subtle head shakes, the way they held their cups with just 2 fingers, as if my touch might contaminate their precious porcelain. Michael, my husband, dismissed their behavior as old-fashioned thinking. He was the golden son, Harvard-educated and primed to take over the family's luxury hotel chain. His love, he promised, would be enough to overcome their prejudices. But love, I would learn, was no match for superstition. The first incident happened 3 months after our wedding. A minor kitchen fire at the Chen's flagship hotel caused an evacuation. No one was hurt, but the timing, during a crucial investor meeting, was unfortunate. That evening, over dinner, my mother-in-law Grace Chen made the first accusation. "It's strange," she mused, eyes fixed on me across their massive dining table. "We've never had such bad fortune before. The spirits must be unsettled by recent changes." Michael squeezed my hand under the table. "Mother, it was an electrical issue. The fire marshal already confirmed it." "Perhaps," Grace replied, sharing a meaningful look with Michael's sisters. "But timing is everything in our culture, and since certain elements entered our family, luck has turned." That was just the beginning. Every minor setback became evidence of my curse. A delayed permit for their new hotel, my unlucky influence, a longtime employee quitting, my negative energy. Even Michael's seasonal allergies were somehow traced back to my presence in their lives. The accusations escalated after Michael's father fell ill. It was a routine case of pneumonia, completely treatable, but Grace turned it into proof of my malevolent influence. "First the business troubles, now this," she announced at the hospital, loud enough for other family members to hear. In our culture, we believe illness follows negative energy. Perhaps if someone hadn't brought foreign spirits into our home. I stood there watching my husband's face for any sign of defense. Michael just stared at his shoes, conflict written across his features. His silence hurt more than his mother's words. The family's spiritual advisor, Master Wong, became a regular visitor to their mansion. He'd perform cleansing rituals in every room I'd entered, burning special incense and hanging protective charms. Grace made sure I knew about each ceremony, sending me photos with captions like "clearing the air" and "protecting the family legacy." Then came the business downturn. The hotel chain's stocks dropped following a general market slump. Nothing unusual, nothing specific to their company, but Grace called an emergency family meeting. "Our ancestors are displeased," she declared, surrounded by Michael's nodding siblings. "The feng shui of our entire enterprise is disturbed. We need to address the source." I sat there, wearing the designer clothes they'd insisted I buy to look appropriate, watching them discuss my supposed curse like I wasn't even in the room. The irony wasn't lost on me. They demanded I adopt their outward appearance while simultaneously declaring me spiritually toxic. That night, I made my first move toward revenge, though they didn't know it yet. I started researching their beliefs, their superstitions, their fears. If they wanted to cast me as a curse, I'd give them a performance they'd never forget. I began by studying everything about Chinese superstitions, feng shui, and traditional beliefs, not to respect them, to weaponize them. Every unlucky number, color, and arrangement became ammunition in my growing arsenal. Grace's precious antique vase, I carefully repositioned it 3 degrees to the left, disrupting the energy flow she'd spent thousands having a feng shui master perfect. Her prized koi pond, I started feeding the fish at inauspicious times, making them surface in patterns that traditional beliefs considered omens. Small things, subtle things. Nothing that could be traced back to me, just enough to make them question their luck. I learned that Grace consulted her fortune teller every Tuesday. So I befriended the old woman's granddaughter at my yoga studio, casually dropping details about the Chen family's business dealings that would find their way into readings. Be cautious, the fortune teller warned Grace, right on cue. The dragon and phoenix are in conflict. Great change is coming. Grace came home pale and shaking. That night, I heard her on the phone with her sisters, discussing signs and portents with growing anxiety. But my masterpiece came during the Lunar New Year celebration. The Chen family hosted an elaborate party for their business associates and social circle. Everything had to be perfect, every tradition observed precisely. I wore red, traditionally lucky, but in a shade that Grace's superstitions considered threatening. My jewelry featured subtle designs that, to the traditionally minded, suggested disruption. Even my makeup incorporated elements that any superstitious Chinese mother-in-law would consider troubling. The whispers started immediately. Business partners' wives who knew the old ways noticed every detail. They murmured behind their hands, shooting significant looks at Grace. The Lunar New Year party became my stage, and every carefully planned detail played its part. I positioned myself near the main entrance, subtly disrupting the flow of luck that Grace believed entered from that direction. When guests arrived, I greeted them with phrases that, while perfectly polite in English, carried uncomfortable double meanings in Mandarin. Grace watched me like a hawk, her perfectly maintained facade cracking slightly each time another guest whispered in her ear. I could read her thoughts. Was I doing it on purpose? Or was I truly the curse she believed me to be? The breaking point came during the traditional family photo. As we arranged ourselves according to custom, I stood exactly where tradition dictated, but my shadow fell across the family altar in what superstition considered an ill omen. Grace nearly fainted. "Move her," she hissed to Michael. "The ancestors, the photos, it's all wrong." But moving me would have caused more obvious disruption, drawing attention to their beliefs in front of their sophisticated business partners. They were trapped between superstition and saving face. That night, after the guests left, I overheard Grace in her private study, consulting with Master Wang via phone. "It's worse than we feared," she whispered. "She's not just unlucky. She knows. She must know. No outsider could accidentally cause so many signs." I smiled in the darkness of the hallway. Finally, she was right about something. This outsider knew exactly what she was doing. Because sometimes the best way to fight superstition isn't to deny it, it's to become the very thing they fear. The war had begun, and I had only shown them the first page of my playbook. The morning after the Lunar New Year disaster, Grace called an emergency family meeting. I wasn't invited, of course, but I didn't need to be. The house's expensive sound system, which they'd insisted on installing in every room for ambiance, worked both ways if you knew which settings to adjust. "She's doing it deliberately." Grace's voice crackled through my hidden earpiece. "No one accidentally violates every tradition so perfectly. She's studied our ways just to mock them." Michael, ever the rational Harvard graduate, tried to defend me. "Mother, you're being paranoid. Kira respects our culture. She's trying to learn." "Learn? She wore a white flower in her hair to a celebration. White is for funerals." Grace's voice rose hysterically. "And did you see how she arranged the oranges on the blessing table? In fours. Everything in fours." I smiled, thinking of those carefully placed oranges. 4 was death in Chinese numerology, something every superstitious mother-in-law knew. But to anyone else, it just looked like elegant symmetry. The family meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, even Michael's resistance was wavering. That evening, he came home with a strange expression. "Sweetheart," he started cautiously, "Mother thinks maybe we should consult someone about cleansing our energy." I widened my eyes innocently. "Of course, if it would make her feel better. Should I wear my jade pendant to the ceremony? The one with the dragon facing west?" He paled slightly. Dragons facing west were considered extremely unlucky, something I'd learned during my research. The fact that I knew this only confirmed their suspicions. But confirming suspicions was exactly my plan, because fear of a curse is often worse than the curse itself. The cleansing ceremony was scheduled for the following week. I spent those days laying groundwork, carefully orchestrating what would appear to be coincidences. First, the Chen's prized koi began swimming in counterclockwise patterns, a bad omen according to their beliefs. Of course, this had nothing to do with the special fish food I'd ordered, formulated to encourage directional swimming. Then came the incident with the family's ancestral tablets. Nothing dramatic. They simply appeared slightly tilted each morning, despite being straightened each night. The security cameras Grace installed showed nothing, because I'd learned their blind spots during my months of playing the dutiful daughter-in-law. The business started suffering too. Small setbacks that I'd carefully engineered through my growing network of contacts. A health inspector who randomly showed up at their flagship hotel during peak hours. Reservation systems that mysteriously glitched during important bookings. Each problem was minor, explainable, completely logical, but together they formed a pattern that drove Grace to increasingly desperate measures. She brought in more spiritual advisors, each more expensive than the last. They burned rare incense, chanted ancient prayers, hung protective charms in every doorway. I watched it all with wide-eyed concern, always eager to help, always managing to be present when something went wrong. Such bad luck, I would murmur, shaking my head sadly. Should we consult the lunar calendar for a better date? The mention of lunar calculations would make Grace flinch, because by now she was certain I knew exactly what I was doing with every word, every action, every seemingly innocent suggestion. But the real performance was yet to come. The day of the cleansing ceremony dawned with perfect timing, a rare summer storm that had Grace muttering about omens before breakfast. I'd been tracking weather patterns for weeks, waiting for exactly this kind of day. Master Wang arrived wearing traditional robes, his face grave as he surveyed the house. The entire Chen family gathered in the main hall, watching as he set up his ceremonial items. I stood quietly beside Michael, dressed in a silk dress that was perfectly appropriate except for one detail. Its subtle pattern incorporated the number 4 8 times. I'd had it specially made. "We must cleanse the house of all negative influences," Master Wang announced, eyeing me significantly. "Some energies are particularly resistant." I bowed respectfully, hiding my smile. What they didn't know was that I'd already met with Master Wang's competitor, a younger feng shui expert who'd been trying to break into the wealthy Chinese community. She'd been very interested in the Chen family's private business matters. The ceremony began with traditional incense burning. Right on cue, the smoke began behaving strangely, curling in inauspicious patterns that had Grace clutching her jade pendant. The special incense powder I'd added to their burners weeks ago worked perfectly. Then came the water blessing. As Master Wang sprinkled blessed water in each corner, the lights flickered, thanks to the small electromagnetic device I'd hidden in the fuse box. Grace's face went pale. "The spirits are restless," Master Wang intoned. "They sense interference." I stepped forward, the picture of concerned innocence. Should we try burning the special papers? The ones with gold leaf? I read about them in that ancient text in the family library. The room went silent. That text was written in traditional Chinese characters. No one had expected me to access it, let alone understand it. Grace's hands trembled as she lit the gold-leafed papers. "How did you—" she started, then stopped herself. The question itself would admit too much. I smiled serenely. "I've been studying so hard to understand our family's traditions. There's so much fascinating information in those old books, especially the ones about curses." Michael shifted uncomfortably beside me. His rational Harvard mind was battling with generations of ingrained superstition. "Kira, maybe we should—" A crash of thunder cut him off. Perfect timing from the storm. In the momentary darkness, I pressed the small remote in my pocket. Throughout the house, carefully placed speakers emitted subsonic frequencies, just low enough to create unease without being identifiable. The koi pond's underwater lights flickered in sequence, making the fish scatter in what looked like panic. Wind chimes I'd strategically repositioned weeks ago created discordant notes. Every coincidence I'd orchestrated came together in a symphony of supernatural suggestion. Master Wang's face showed genuine concern now. Not at the supernatural. He was too experienced a fraud for that. No, he was worried because someone else was orchestrating a better show than he was. "This is unprecedented," he admitted, watching as his blessed water turned slightly cloudy from the harmless powder I'd added to the house's pipes. "The energy here is aware." Grace grabbed Michael's arm. You see? You see what she's brought into our home?" But I wasn't done. I turned to Master Wang with wide, innocent eyes. "Oh, Is this like the pattern described in the Book of Changes, when the dragon faces west during the seventh moon? Master Wang dropped his ceremonial beads. That obscure reference wasn't something a casual student would know. It was the kind of deep knowledge that suggested years of study, or very specific intent. The ceremony ended early, with Master Wang making excuses about needing to consult older texts. As the family dispersed, shaken and uncertain, I caught Grace watching me with a new kind of fear. Because now she knew. I wasn't just bad luck. I was something much worse. I was deliberate. The week after the failed cleansing ceremony, the Chen family empire began crumbling in earnest. Not through any supernatural means, but through the careful groundwork I'd laid while playing the confused foreign bride. During those months of trying to learn the business, I'd actually learned everything. Every weakness, every secret account, every questionable deal. While Grace was busy protecting against bad luck, I'd been documenting good old-fashioned fraud. It started with their flagship hotel. An anonymous tip led health inspectors to check the kitchen during a major charity gala. They found violations that had been carefully orchestrated through my connection with their former head chef, a man Grace had fired for bringing bad energy. The timing was perfect. Right as Grace finished another blessing ceremony, news broke about the hotel's violations. She dropped her prayer beads, watching her phone light up with cancellations. "It's escalating," she whispered to her spiritual advisor. "The curse is attacking our foundation." I sat in the corner, quietly embroidering, an appropriately traditional activity. My needle just happened to be piercing a design that any superstitious Chinese mother would recognize as deeply unfortunate. Grace couldn't even complain without admitting she saw meaning in it. But business violations were just the beginning. Because I discovered something during my late-night research sessions, Grace had her own secrets, and they had nothing to do with spirits. Grace's secret life unraveled like expensive silk, one careful pull at a time. First came the anonymous emails to family members, revealing her private consultations with not one, but 3 different fortune tellers. Each gave conflicting advice that she followed religiously, resulting in chaotic business decisions she blamed on bad luck. Then her personal accounts started showing discrepancies. Not because of any curse, but because I'd discovered her habit of skimming from the hotel's books to pay for increasingly expensive spiritual cures. The evidence found its way to the company's board members through untraceable channels. Michael, caught between his Harvard-educated logic and his cultural programming, started sleeping poorly. "Things keep happening," he confided during one sleepless night. "Mother says it's your energy, but what?" I asked innocently, arranging our bedroom's feng shui objects in subtly wrong positions. "But it feels intentional, like something's playing with us." I touched his face gently. Maybe the universe is trying to tell us something. The next day, Grace received a package. Inside was a traditional charm meant to ward off evil, except this one was crafted backwards, making it, according to legend, a beacon for misfortune. The note claimed it was from a prestigious temple. She hung it prominently, not realizing its reverse significance. Within hours, more financial irregularities surfaced. Board members started asking questions about years of suspicious transactions. The charm hung above it all, silently broadcasting its reversed blessings. But my masterpiece was still to come. During my months of research, I discovered Grace's most carefully guarded secret, a second set of books hidden behind her ancestral altar. No one would dare look there, which made it the perfect hiding place. But I wasn't bound by their superstitions. The records revealed years of financial manipulation, all disguised as spiritual necessities. Money laundered through temples, kickbacks from feng shui consultants, even a secret account funded by donations meant for ancestral offerings. I didn't expose this directly. Instead, I arranged for Grace to catch me praying at the ancestral altar late one night. She found me burning spirit money, traditional ghost currency, except I was burning copies of her secret transactions. "What are you doing?" she demanded, horror crossing her face as she recognized the papers. "Sending messages to our ancestors," I replied calmly. "They seem very interested in these numbers." The blood drained from her face. In her worldview, I'd just sent evidence of her crimes directly to the spirit world. She couldn't stop me without admitting what the papers were, couldn't explain without revealing her schemes. That night, she fell ill. Not from any supernatural cause, but from the stress of watching her carefully constructed world unravel. As she lay in her bed, surrounded by protective charms, I brought her special tea brewed with herbs that, according to tradition, opened one's eyes to spiritual messages. The ancestors want everything in the open, I told her softly. No more secrets. She knew then, knew that every supernatural occurrence, every strange coincidence, every bit of bad luck had been orchestrated. But she couldn't expose me without exposing herself. I had become her personal curse, using her own beliefs and guilt against her. The final act began during the Mid-Autumn Festival, when the Chen family traditionally hosted their most important business associates. Grace, still weak from her illness, watched helplessly as I took charge of the arrangements. Everything I planned was technically perfect, following every tradition to the letter. But each element carried subtle doubles meanings that only the most superstitious would notice. The lanterns were hung at precise angles that suggested declining fortune. The mooncakes were cut in patterns that whispered of family secrets coming to light. Grace's old friends, equally steeped in traditional beliefs, noticed everything. They whispered behind their fans, watching as I moved through the party like a perfectly trained daughter-in-law who just happened to be versed in ancient omens. Then came my gift to Grace, a beautiful antique mirror, positioned exactly where tradition said it would reflect family fortunes. What she didn't know was that it was angled to catch the light in a way that would show glimpses of her secret accounting books, still hidden behind the ancestral altar. Such an interesting reflection, one guest commented, squinting at the mirror. Almost like seeing numbers. Grace nearly fainted. But she couldn't move the mirror without causing a scene, couldn't explain without revealing everything. She was trapped by her own superstitions and secrets. That night, after the guests left, she confronted me in the garden. "What do you want?" she whispered, her composure finally cracking. "Name your price." I smiled, touching one of her precious peonies. The flower wilted slightly, a simple trick with a hidden wire, but the timing made her gasp. "Want? Oh, mother, I don't want anything. I'm just learning to be a proper Chinese daughter-in-law. Isn't that what you always wanted?" She understood then. Really understood. I hadn't just learned their customs, I'd mastered them. Every superstition she'd used against me had become my weapon. Every tradition she'd wielded as a barrier had become my door. The curse she'd imagined had become real, not through any supernatural power, but through her own fears and guilt. And I was just getting started. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I served mine with perfect feng shui and burning incense. 1 year after the Mid-Autumn Festival that broke Grace's spirit, I sat in her former office at the Chen family estate, watching as workers removed the last of her protective charms. The room would become a nursery. I was 4 months pregnant with the next Chen heir. Grace hadn't taken the news well. After all, in her world, a cursed woman shouldn't be able to carry the precious Chen bloodline. When I announced my pregnancy during another family dinner, timing it perfectly with a sudden power outage, thank you, timed circuit breaker, she'd finally shattered completely. "It's not possible," she'd screamed, years of careful composure dissolving. "The spirits wouldn't allow it, unless—" Her eyes had widened with new horror. "Unless they've chosen her side." The board of directors had chosen sides too. After anonymous tips led to a full audit, Grace's financial manipulations came to light. Years of embezzlement, all disguised as spiritual necessities, were exposed. The same superstitions she'd used to control others had been her downfall. No one had questioned money spent on ancestral offerings or spiritual cleansings. Michael, faced with undeniable evidence of his mother's crimes, finally had to choose. His Harvard-educated mind couldn't ignore the paper trail, couldn't explain away the fraud with supernatural excuses. He chose his company's survival, and me. Grace now lived in a small apartment across town, surrounded by protective charms that didn't protect her from justice. Her social circle, those same superstitious friends who'd helped her torment me, avoided her like the bad luck she'd always accused me of bringing. The final blow came during the Lunar New Year, exactly 2 years after I'd begun my campaign. Grace tried one last time to regain control, sending a famous spiritual advisor to warn about the dangers of a cursed woman bearing the family heir. I welcomed him into my home, formerly her home, with perfect traditional courtesy. As we sat in the redesigned living room, every element placed to suggest prosperity and power, I served him tea in cups that had belonged to the Chen family for generations. Master Lu, I said softly, before you begin, you should know something. I've studied with your former student, the one who left your temple after certain financial discrepancies came to light. He froze, teacup halfway to his lips. It would be unfortunate if those old stories resurfaced, I continued, especially the ones about missing donation funds. He left without delivering his warning. The next day, he announced his retirement from spiritual advising. Grace's last ally had abandoned her. Now, as I prepare the nursery for my son, I sometimes catch glimpses of her watching the house from her car. She never approaches. The restraining order prevents that. But I make sure she sees me rearranging her precious feng shui objects, changing the energy flows she spent years perfecting. Last week, I received a letter from her. Inside was a jade pendant, a traditional gift for an expectant mother, but I recognized it as the one she'd worn for protection against my supposed curse. You've won, she wrote. The spirits have chosen. Take care of my grandson. I hung the pendant in the nursery window, where sunlight makes it cast interesting shadows on the wall. Shadows that, to a superstitious eye, might look like ancient symbols of power. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning. It's making them believe you had supernatural help doing it.